Hey everybody, Bill Panoff here for another edition of Cruise Control, and I'm here with my very dear friend for over 40 years, Gary Hunter. Now Gary was responsible for bringing me into the cruise industry. It was his fault because my parents always wanted to be a doctor or a lawyer, but I wound up as a cruise ship entertainer thanks to Gary.
Yes, I remember when you brought your parents on the ship for the first time, your father, he had a private meeting with me and he says, "You're the reason my son is not a doctor or a lawyer."
Indeed. But it turned out to be a very good career for me and a very good career for you. I mean, tell us how you got started in the cruise ship business and how you first came to work on cruise ships.
My first ship was the Mardi Gras with Carnival Cruise Line back in 1975. Yep. And I came on board the ship as an act, as a ventriloquist. And it was interesting. My ventriloquism career started actually while I was in school. I was putting myself through college with my act, and I thought, well, maybe I'll just try to do this for a living. And that's how it all came about. And I'd always thought about cruise ships. And I was performing in a show down right outside of Tampa.
Right.
It was a retirement center. And there was a retired song and dance vaudevillian act who had a little variety show. He was retired there and living there. And he put me in the show. And he said, "Kid," he says, "you know what? Those cruise ships are looking for novelty acts like yourself, and you should go down there and try it out." So in 1975, I drove down to Miami and tried to see some of the entertainment buyers and vice presidents of entertainment. Nobody would see me.
No, why?
Nobody. Who knows? It was a cold call, so to speak.
Right.
And so I just left resumes and photos under the doors. And then a few months later, I got a phone call from Mike Zonas.
Mike Zonas,
He was the senior vice president of operations at Carnival Cruise Line.
my boss as well.
And he said, "Can you be in my office tomorrow morning at 10:15 for an audition?" So I drove down and checked into the Mardi Gras Motel.
No relationship to the Mardi Gras ship.
I thought it was the Mardi Gras. I thought, I bet they own this too, right? And of course they didn't. It was a hotel that, remember those beds that you could put a quarter in?
Yes.
And it would vibrate?
It would vibrate, yes.
Yes. There was a lot of vibration going on in this hotel.
So it was a honeymoon hotel.
It was a honeymoon hotel. And so the next morning I showed up at the old office at Biscayne Boulevard.
You know it well.
And Mr. Zonas met me, and he brought in his secretaries, Beth and Ada, and a gentleman named Paul Wells.
Paul Wells. Yeah.
And he put me in a corner. He says, "Okay," he says, "do your act." So I was doing my act, and Beth and Ada, they were laughing. Paul Wells was laughing, but Mr. Zonas, he was sitting there and nothing.
Oh boy.
Nothing.
Tough
And
crowd.
I thought, I'm not getting this job. And I don't know what happened, but the dummy, I had a little boy dummy named Rusty. He says, "Why isn't the fat guy behind the desk laughing?" And Mr. Zonas smiles, and he hired me.
Wow.
He said, I'm gonna send you out on the cruise and see how you do. And years later, he told me, he said, "The reason I hired you is because you know that a cruise ship audience, sometimes there might be something that doesn't quite go right, and I wanted to see if you were able to respond to anything like that." And so he hired me because of that line. Now, it wasn't a very nice line to do or anything, but I ended up getting the job. So I went on a 2-week audition cruise, and after the 2 weeks, he came to me and he said, "I'm going to offer you a 4-week contract." He says it automatically renews every 4 weeks unless there's written notice from you or from me. And that 4-week contract ran for 15 years.
Wow. 15 years for Carnival.
That same contract.
Wow.
I never signed another contract.
Unbelievable.
Yeah.
Now, when I boarded the ships, you were the cruise director, and
That's right. In Baltimore.
In Baltimore, Maryland.
1978.
I was in my late 20s, I believe, back then, and I boarded the ship with not much of a magic act, and I was very gung-ho to working on a cruise ship because at that time there was a show called The Love Boat that was very popular on TV, and I kept calling the entertainment director. His name was Arthur Ashton. Finally, I wore it down, and you were on board and gracious enough to see something in me that many people didn't see. Just like Mr. Zonas saw something in you.
That's right.
You saw something in me.
Well, you know, back in the day, Mr. Zonas and Carnival Cruise Lines gave a lot of us young acts a place to work and perfect our performances in front of a live audience.
Sure.
There's very few places like that today. Today, if you're going out to perform, and I'm looking to anyone who's out there in the entertainment business that wants to get on cruise ships, if you go out there today, if your act is not polished and professional, you're not being invited back.
Exactly.
Back then, they were very gracious to allow us to really perfect our acts. And
using different audiences and different guests
every cruise, yeah,
exactly.
And back then, remember, we were doing sometimes 2-3 shows, because you did a welcome aboard show. You always did a farewell show, and those were short little bits, maybe 10 or 15 minutes.
Yep.
And then you had your regular show, and then you had your midnight special show. So we were working and building a lot of material back then, and the audience changed every week. And so if something worked, you would just keep working on it. If it didn't work, you just
take it out. Yeah, exactly. You had many different characters or puppets back then. You Mr. and Mrs. Tweed.
That's right.
And who became...
I had a gorilla.
You had a gorilla?
Well, it was a monkey puppet. I was a chimpanzee. I had him for a while. I had a bird puppet. I had a baby puppet. And
did you bring anything with you today to...
Well, I don't do it anymore. I don't do it anymore.
Gotcha.
But I do always travel with a sock puppet now.
A sock puppet? Okay.
Because I get kids, and they go, "Oh, I hear you're a ventriloquist, and you do something." So I
there you go.
It's just a simple little sock puppet, and you put it on, just to sort of do a little demonstration of ventriloquism. So
cute.
Hi, how are you?
Fine. Who's this?
This is Bill.
Hi, how are you?
No, you have to look at the camera.
Hi.
Hi, Bill.
How you doing?
See, if you turn this way, they can't see your mouth.
Oh, I'm sorry. Hi.
Hi.
What's that?
That's a camera.
That's a camera back there.
Yeah, there's people out there watching.
Oh, why?
Well, because we're talking about the cruise industry. And Bill and I have known each other for a long time.
How long?
Since 1978.
Oh, my goodness.
It's a long time.
Now, what's his name?
His name is Bill.
Bill.
Oh, I can't say that.
Why?
Because it's got a B in it.
Oh, I know. B's are very difficult for a ventriloquist to say.
Why?
Because you have to purse your lips together. Watch. B.
Oh, I can't say Bill?
You can't say Bill.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. So I can't say Bill?
No.
And what's his last name?
Panop. And you can't say Panop either.
Why?
Because P's are very hard to say.
What do you mean?
Because you have to purse your lips together to say P.
Oh, let me try it.
Okay, you try it.
Okay. P.
You see, you moved your mouth.
So I can't say Bill Panop?
You cannot say Bill Panop.
Oh.
So anyway,
That's great.
I don't really do ventriloquism
Yeah,
anymore.
yeah.
I'm retired, but I do carry a puppet around
love
just
that.
for just for children and everything. And plus, when you're flying, if you've got a kid kicking your seat, right, I would get the puppet out and just have him look right through the crack of the seats and everything. No more kicking.
Wow.
All right, say bye-bye.
Bye.
See you later.
Okay,
What are you going to do?
I'm gonna take it.
Oh.
That's great. So, Gary, apart from Carnival, after you left Carnival, you moved on to other cruise lines. You worked for a very long time with a premier line called Crystal Cruises.
That's right. Well, after I left Carnival in November of 1990, I took 3 months off, and a friend of ours, actually Philip Levine, had told me about a company called Crystal Cruises that was coming out. And I had an agent who was booking me. And so I told him, I said, listen, I need you to call up Cliff Perry.
Yes.
Cliff Perry, who was the entertainment vice president at Crystal Cruises. And so Mr. Miller called up Cliff Perry and got me on board a ship, which was a Mexican Riviera cruise out of Los Angeles. And so I did that cruise, and that turned into a long-term arrangement with them. But for 12 years, from 1991 until 2002, 2003 it was, I just flew from ship to ship.
So you were a flyer.
I did, yeah, and I worked for all the different companies. I worked for Holland America. I did some cruises on Princess. I did some cruises on Royal Cruise Lines.
Sure.
Also, Carnival was there. I mean, no, not Carnival, but Crystal Cruises. Cunard. So I was working on all the ships, just flying around the world performing. And I was booked out about a year and a half out from
good.
I was never out of work, which was great. But I had decided I was only going to work for about 6 months for the rest of my life. I had put in my time at Carnival, so I thought, okay, I can work 6 months a year and still have the lifestyle that I want to have. And so I was going out for 2 to 3 weeks, coming home for 2 to 3 weeks. If I was going to Asia or a far place away from home here in Florida, sometimes I would stay for 6 weeks, but then I would come home for 6 weeks because I was trying to balance out my career with a family life as well. So then Crystal was building a new ship called the Serenity. They had the Harmony, they had the Symphony.
Yep.
And Thomas Muslim and Brett Bullock, they called me and they said, listen, we're building a new ship and we'd like for you to be the cruise director on it. Because they knew that I'd had a past as a cruise director with Carnival Cruise Lines, which was the greatest education in the world.
Absolutely.
Listen, if you were working Carnival back in the day, I mean, it was like getting a master's class.
I agree.
You know,
I agree.
In the entertainment business, working with people, the whole cruise industry. You know, I cannot thank Ted Harrison, Mike Zonas, Mickey Harrison.
Sure.
Those guys, listen, they...
Same here. I mean...
They were amazing to me.
Yeah.
So anyway, they said, if you'd like, you can be the cruise director. And I said, well, I don't really want to give up my act because I love performing.
Right.
And they said, well, you don't have to give up your act. You can perform and you can be the cruise director. And that was the way it was in the old days at Carnival.
Yep.
So it felt right at home for me.
Sure.
It was more work, you know, because, you know, cruise director puts in some long hours.
And a cruise director on Crystal, you're wearing an officer's uniform,
We were considered conference officers.
Yep.
And so we had the full officer's uniform. We had full privileges. It was an amazing job. But the kicker was they said, listen, you still only have to work 6 months a year.
Wow.
I said, all right, sounds good to me. And so that's how I ended up with Crystal, and I stayed with Crystal until 2020.
What a career. You know, just yesterday, you and I met up with a fellow entertainer, cruise director who we've known for, 30, 40 years, Bob Goss. We had lunch together. We're rekindling some of these memories, which are quite special because many of the folks that we grew up with, some of them are no longer with us. And
But, you know, back in the day, you always had novelty acts on board the ship.
Sure.
Generally a magician, a ventriloquist, a juggler.
Yeah.
Then you had a male vocalist, a female vocalist.
Yeah.
And then they started putting in these little quartets that would dance and sing. And that was the beginning of the production shows on the ships.
Yeah.
And we would incorporate them into the performances. Foot jugglers, remember Jean-Claude?
Jean-Claude.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so it was like a vaudeville at sea. That was what was great about the old cruise ships. It was vaudeville at sea.
Yeah.
And I'm telling you, you would watch these acts and you would learn so much. The guy that taught me probably the most was a gentleman. His name was Benjamin Rothman. He went by the name of the atomic comic Benny Ray.
Benny Ray.
And he was at Carnival when I first went on board the ship. And he took me under his wings and he taught me so much. And you know what was interesting? It was he lived on the island that we would pass by sailing out of Dodge Island.
Oh, wow.
And he lived in Al Capone's old house.
Oh.
Benny Ray, the atomic comic.
Gary, what a pleasure interviewing you. What a pleasure to see you again and reminisce. And
Well, we've had some great times.
Yeah.
I mean, what you don't really know about this man was he was a phenomenal comedy magic act.
Yeah.
And it was a zany act, but very, very funny. He was the first act that ever asked me, do we have a water hose on board the ship? And I go, what would you need a water hose for? And
he used to squirt the audience.
He used to squirt the audience if they did not laugh with a water hose with a spray nozzle on the front of it. Yeah. I'd never seen that before. And people loved it.
Yeah.
He was the first Gallagher. We used to hand out raincoats.
Exactly.
Yeah, but that was very funny what you did there. And then of course you eventually became a cruise director because as Carnival,
thanks to you,
as Carnival crew with new ships. You became part of the Carnival family.
Exactly.
It was. But then I remember when Bill had a little newsletter. And you were printing this little newsletter and handing it out to all the acts and different people and everything. And the next thing you know, Bill was telling me he was leaving the ships. Why? when the next thing you know, we have Porthole
There
Magazine.
you go.
And here we are.
35, 40 years ago.
It's amazing.
Yeah.
You done well?
What a pleasure.
Yeah.
Gary, yeah. If only you guys were there to see us in those days, but we're going to put together this video in such a way with a lot of B-roll so you can recapture and relive those moments with us. I'm Bill Panoff. Thanks for tuning in. You're watching Cruise Control. Thank you.